The crack of gunfire echoed across the dusty main street of Silver Creek as Sarah Kincaid stepped off the stagecoach, her hands trembling around the handle of her worn leather suitcase. It was 1876, and the Colorado Territory was as wild as the stories she'd heard back east. She ducked instinctively as another shot rang out, only to be steadied by the surprisingly gentle hand of the driver. "Just the saloon boys celebrating payday, madam," he said with a crooked smile. "Welcome to Silver Creek." Sarah straightened her blue traveling dress and took in the frontier town with wide eyes. Wooden buildings lined the street, their facades weathered by harsh seasons and harsher living. Men in dusty clothes moved with purpose, hardly sparing her a glance. A few women, their dresses practical and worn, hurried along boardwalks with baskets of goods. This would be her home now, a far cry from Boston's cobblestone streets and society parlors. The general store stood at the corner, its painted sign faded but legible. Her uncle's store, her future. With a deep breath, Sarah walked toward it, mindful of the mud that threatened to ruin her only good boots. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, announcing her arrival to the lone figure standing behind the counter. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing tanned, muscular forearms. A leather vest hung open across his chest, and a worn Stetson sat on the counter beside him. His face was half hidden as he bent over a ledger, but she could see the strong line of his jaw darkened with stubble. "Excuse me," Sarah said, setting down her bag. "I'm looking for Mr. Thaddeus Kincaid." The man looked up, and something in Sarah's chest fluttered. His eyes were a startling shade of blue, set in a face that seemed carved from the surrounding mountains themselves, all hard angles and weathered plains. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just studied her with those intense eyes. "I'm his niece, Sarah Kincaid," she continued, unsettled by his silence. "He's expecting me." The man nodded once, then looked past her to the doorway. A moment later, an older man with a shock of white hair and a broad smile bustled in from the back room. "Sarah, my dear girl, you've arrived." Her uncle wrapped her in a bear hug that smelled of tobacco and peppermint. When he released her, he gestured to the silent man. "I see you've met Hunter O'Malley. He helps me run the place, best damn worker in the territory, even if he's not much for conversation." Hunter nodded at her again, his expression unchanged, then returned to his ledger. "Hunter, make yourself useful and take Sarah's bag upstairs to the room we've prepared," Thaddeus instructed. Without a word, Hunter rounded the counter, lifted her bag as if it weighed nothing, and headed toward a narrow staircase at the back of the store. Sarah watched him go, noting the easy strength in his movements, the confidence in his stride. "Don't mind him," Thaddeus said, patting her shoulder. "Hunter's been through more than his share of hardship, lost his family to Comanche raiders when he was just a boy. Grew up wild, riding with various outfits until he landed here a few years back. He doesn't say much, but he's loyal as they come." Sarah nodded, wondering about the man who moved like a shadow through her uncle's store. "I'm just grateful to be here, Uncle, after Father's passing." Her voice trailed off. "I know, dear. Your father was a good man, my brother. I'm sorry I couldn't attend the funeral." Thaddeus's eyes grew sad. "But you're here now and we'll make the best of it. The store needs a woman's touch and I'm not getting any younger." That evening, Sarah sat at her uncle's dinner table, along with Hunter, who'd been invited to join them. The meal was simple roast beef, potatoes, and fresh bread, but after days of travel and meager stagecoach provisions, it tasted like heaven to Sarah. Hunter ate methodically, his eyes on his plate. When Thaddeus asked him a question about a shipment, he answered in a low, gravelly voice with the minimum words necessary. His voice startled Sarah. She'd begun to wonder if he could speak at all. "Sarah will be helping in the store starting tomorrow," Thaddeus announced. "Show her the ropes, would you, Hunter?" Hunter's eyes flickered to Sarah, then back to his plate. He nodded once. "He's a man of few words," Thaddeus chuckled, "but you couldn't ask for a better teacher." The next morning, Sarah rose early, dressed in a simple brown skirt and white blouse, and headed downstairs. Hunter was already there, sweeping the wooden floor with methodical strokes. He glanced up when she entered, and for just a moment, something in his eyes softened before he looked away. Good morning, she offered. Uncle said you'd show me what to do. Hunter leaned the broom against the wall and motioned for her to follow him to the counter. He pulled out the ledger he'd been working on yesterday and opened it to a clean page. Taking a pencil, he wrote in a surprisingly elegant hand, "Inventory first, then customers." "You could just tell me," Sarah said, puzzled. He gave her a look that she couldn't quite interpret, then wrote, "Easier this way sometimes." For the next hour, Hunter showed her the store's organization system. He didn't speak a single word, but his written instructions were clear and precise. When the first customers arrived, he stepped back and let her handle them, watching with those intense blue eyes, occasionally nodding his approval. By midday, Sarah was exhausted but exhilarated. The store was busy with a steady stream of ranchers, miners, and townspeople coming in for supplies. Hunter remained a silent presence, stepping in only when she needed help with something heavy or when she didn't know the price of an item. When her uncle returned from his meeting with the town council, he beamed at them both. "How's our new shopkeeper doing, Hunter?" Hunter looked at Sarah and the corner of his mouth twitched, almost but not quite a smile. "Fine," he said simply, high praise coming from him. Thaddeus laughed. "Go take your dinner break, Sarah. Hunter and I can handle things for an hour." The days settled into a rhythm. Sarah quickly learned the business, taking to it with an intelligence and charm that impressed even the most grizzled cowboys who came through their doors. Her uncle was delighted with her work, and even Hunter seemed to approve, though he remained as taciturn as ever. But Sarah began to notice something curious. Whenever she entered a room where Hunter was working, his eyes would track her, and something in them would change. The hard, guarded look would soften, just for an instant, before he turned away. She caught him watching her often, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but with a quiet intensity that made her wonder what thoughts moved behind those striking blue eyes. 2 weeks after her arrival, the town held a social at the church. Thaddeus insisted they all attend. "You need to meet people your own age," he told Sarah. "And Hunter could use some socializing too before he turns into a complete hermit." Hunter frowned at this but didn't argue. That evening, Sarah dressed in her best gown, a light blue creation with modest lace trim that her mother had insisted she pack for special occasions. When she descended the stairs, both men were waiting in the store's front room. Thaddeus whistled appreciatively, but it was Hunter's reaction that caught her attention. He stood very still, his eyes wide as they took her in from head to toe. For the first time since she'd met him, his face showed clear emotion, something like wonder mixed with an aching vulnerability that made her breath catch. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the look vanished, replaced by his usual stoic expression. The social was lively, with a fiddle player and a small band providing music for dancing. Sarah was immediately surrounded by eager young men from the town and nearby ranches, all wanting to make the acquaintance of the pretty newcomer. She danced and chatted, enjoying herself despite the awkwardness of being the center of attention. Throughout the evening, she was aware of Hunter standing against the wall, a cup of punch in his hand, watching the proceedings with his usual impassive gaze. Several times she caught his eye, but he always looked away quickly. As the evening wore on, a tall, handsome man with slick-backed hair and an expensive suit approached her. "Miss Kincaid, I'm Stanley Preston, owner of the Silver Creek Bank. May I have this dance?" Something about his too smooth manner put Sarah on edge, but not wanting to be rude, she accepted. As they twirled around the floor, Preston held her a little too close, his hand drifting lower on her back than was proper. "You're a lovely addition to our little town," he said, his breath hot against her ear. "A lady of quality. You must find it tedious working in that dusty store with old Kincaid and that mute savage he employs." Sarah stiffened. "My uncle is a fine businessman, and Mr. O'Malley is a hard worker and a gentleman," Preston laughed. "O'Malley, a gentleman? My dear, the man's practically feral. Rumor has it he lived with the Indians for years after his family was killed. Barely speaks English anymore. Not the sort of company a refined lady should keep." Anger flashed through Sarah. I find Mr. O'Malley's company far preferable to that of men who judge others without knowing them, she said coldly, pulling away from him. If you'll excuse me. She walked quickly toward the refreshment table, her cheeks burning. As she reached for a cup of punch, a large hand appeared, offering her one. Hunter stood beside her, his expression unreadable as always, but something like concern showed in his eyes. Thank you, she murmured, taking the cup. He nodded, then hesitated. In a voice so low she almost didn't hear it, he said, Preston's trouble. Sarah blinked in surprise, both at the warning and the fact that he'd spoken to her directly. I gathered that much, she replied. He seems to have a poor opinion of you. A ghost of a smile touched Hunter's lips. Feelings mutual. Sarah couldn't help but smile back. That's the most words I've heard you string together since we met, Hunter shrugged, looking uncomfortable. You don't have to talk if you don't want to, she said gently. But I'd like to hear your voice more often. It's a nice voice. His eyes widened slightly, and that softness she'd glimpsed before returned to them. For a moment they stood in silence, something unspoken passing between them. The moment was broken when a burly miner stumbled into Hunter, spilling punch down the front of his clean shirt, the only one he owned, Sarah knew. Watch yourself, half-breed, the miner slurred, clearly drunk. Hunter's expression closed off immediately, his body tensing. He set his cup down carefully and turned to leave. Hunter, wait, Sarah called, but he was already striding toward the door, his back rigid. The next morning, Hunter wasn't at the store. Thaddeus explained that he'd ridden out early to check on a shipment that was overdue. He'll be back tomorrow likely, her uncle said. Don't worry about him, Hunter's used to handling himself. But Sarah did worry. She'd seen the hurt flash across Hunter's face at the miner's slur, quickly hidden behind his usual mask. There was a story there, one she found herself increasingly curious about. When Hunter returned the following afternoon, dust-covered and weary, Sarah was alone in the store. He nodded to her and headed straight for the back room where the new shipments were processed. Making a decision, Sarah locked the front door and flipped the closed sign. It was nearly closing time anyway. Then she followed him. Hunter was unpacking a crate of canned goods, his movements efficient despite his obvious fatigue. You left without saying goodbye, she said softly. He paused, then continued working without looking at her. Didn't see the point in staying. That man was drunk and cruel. No one else there thinks like that. Hunter let out a short, humorless laugh. Plenty do, just don't say it to my face. Sarah moved closer until she was standing beside him. Why do you let them think you can barely speak? Why do you keep yourself so distant from everyone? His hands stilled on a can of peaches. For a long moment he was silent, and Sarah thought he wouldn't answer. Then in a low voice he said, people fear what's different, what they don't understand. Easier to keep to myself than fight battles I can't win. What happened to you? She asked gently. After your family, my uncle said you were just a boy. Hunter set the can down carefully and straightened, finally looking at her. His eyes held such depth of feeling that Sarah's breath caught. Comanche took me in, lived with them for 8 years, became one of them in many ways. His voice was rough with emotion and disuse. When I came back to the white world, I wasn't welcome in either. Too Indian for whites, too white for Indians. Sarah's heart ached for the lonely boy he must have been. Is that why you don't talk much, because people judge you for it? He shrugged, partly just habit. Comanche value silence. Words should have weight, purpose. A faint smile touched his lips, and partly because most people don't say much worth responding to. Sarah couldn't help but smile at that. And what about me? Do I say things worth responding to? His eyes softened as they looked at her, that same transformation she'd noticed before making him seem younger, more vulnerable. You do. The simple sincerity in his voice made her heart flutter. Then I hope you'll talk to me more. I'd like to know you, Hunter O'Malley. Something shifted in his expression, hope, perhaps, or fear, she couldn't tell. But before he could respond, there was a loud knock at the store's front door. Kincaid, open up. A man's voice called. Hunter's expression hardened instantly. Preston, he muttered, moving past her toward the front of the store. Sarah followed, watching as Hunter unlocked the door to reveal the banker, flanked by 2 rough-looking men. Store's closed, Hunter said flatly. Preston's smile was cold. I'm not here for shopping, O'Malley. I'm here to speak with Miss Kincaid. His eyes slid past Hunter to Sarah. Alone, preferably, Sarah stepped forward. Anything you have to say to me can be said in front of Mr. O'Malley. Preston's smile tightened. Very well, I've come to make you an offer, Miss Kincaid. I understand your uncle's health has been declining. Running this store must be quite a burden for a lady such as yourself. My uncle's health is fine, Sarah replied, puzzled, and the store is thriving. Perhaps now, yes, but Thaddeus Kincaid owes a substantial sum to my bank. A loan that's coming due very soon. I doubt he'll be able to pay it in full, which means this property will revert to the bank. Preston adjusted his cufflinks. However, I'm prepared to be generous. Marry me and I'll forgive the debt entirely. You'll want for nothing as my wife. Sarah stared at him in disbelief. Marry you? I hardly know you, Mr. Preston, and I find your manner of proposal highly inappropriate. Preston's face hardened. Don't be foolish, girl. Your uncle will lose everything. Where will you go then? Back east. With what money? He stepped closer. Think about it. I'll give you 3 days. Hunter moved so quickly Sarah barely saw it. Suddenly, he was between her and Preston, his stance protective. She said no, leave. The two men with Preston reached for guns at their hips, but Hunter didn't flinch. Preston laughed. Are you her protector now, savage? How touching. He backed toward the door. 3 days, Miss Kincaid, choose wisely. With that, he and his men departed. Sarah's hands were shaking. Is it true about Uncle's loan? Hunter turned to her, his face grim. Don't know. Thaddeus handles the finances himself. He hesitated, then added, but Preston's been trying to buy this place for years. Wants the land for the railroad coming through. We need to talk to Uncle right away, Sarah said, already moving toward the stairs that led to their living quarters. They found Thaddeus in his bedroom, napping. When they woke him and explained Preston's visit, the old man's face fell. It's true, I'm afraid, he admitted. Business was bad last winter before you came, Sarah. I took a loan to get us through. He sighed heavily. I thought I'd have it paid off by year's end, but with the drought affecting the ranchers, our best customers have been spending less. How much do you owe? Hunter asked, his voice sharper than Sarah had ever heard it. $500, Thaddeus replied, due in 2 weeks. Sarah sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. That's impossible, we don't have that kind of money. No, Thaddeus agreed, but Preston's been after this property for ages. This was his plan all along. He looked at Sarah apologetically. I never imagined he'd propose to you, though. The man's a snake. I won't marry him, Sarah said firmly. We'll find another way. Hunter had been standing silently by the door, his face unreadable. Now he straightened. I have money, he said quietly. About 300 saved. Sarah and Thaddeus stared at him in surprise. Hunter, no, Thaddeus protested. That's your savings, your future, Hunter shrugged. No use for it otherwise. Even with your money, we're still short, Sarah pointed out, and 2 weeks isn't much time to earn $200. Hunter was silent for a moment, thinking. The poker tournament in Sweetwater. Next week, prize is $1,000. Thaddeus laughed bitterly. And every card sharp between here and St. Louis will be there. It's too risky. I'm good, Hunter said simply. You're a fair hand at poker, I'll grant you, Thaddeus conceded, but those professionals will eat you alive. Hunter's eyes met Sarah's, and in them she saw determination and something else, a fierce protectiveness that made her heart race. Worth trying, he said. Before Sarah could respond, there was a commotion downstairs, the bell over the door jingling, followed by raised voices. We're closed, Thaddeus called out, struggling to his feet. Hunter was already moving, heading for the stairs with quick, silent steps. Sarah followed, a sense of dread building in her chest. They found 4 men in the store, rough-looking fellows with dust on their clothes and guns on their hips. One, a tall man with a jagged scar across his cheek, grinned when he saw Hunter. Well, look who it is. The Comanche's pet white boy, all grown up. Hunter went very still, his hand hovering near the gun he wore on his hip, a weapon Sarah had never seen him draw. Rollins, he said, his voice flat. You're not welcome here, Rollins laughed, a harsh sound that sent chills down Sarah's spine. That any way to greet an old friend. We rode together with the Jenkins outfit, boys, he told his companions. Until this half-breed turned yellowbelly and ran off. I quit, Hunter corrected, his voice steady but tight. After you murdered that family. Rollins' face darkened. We were just having some fun. No one cared about a few dead Mexicans. Sarah gasped at the casual cruelty in his voice. Hunter's eyes flicked to her briefly, then back to Rollins. What do you want? Hunter demanded. Just passing through, Rollins said with a shrug. Heard there was a high-stakes poker game in Sweetwater next week. Thought we'd try our luck. He looked around the store with contempt. Look at you playing shopkeeper like a tame dog. The boys wouldn't believe it if I told them. Thaddeus had made his way downstairs and now stood beside Sarah. Our store is closed, gentlemen. I'll have to ask you to leave. Rollins ignored him, his eyes fixed on Hunter. What's the matter, O'Malley? Afraid your little girlfriend here will find out what kind of man you really are, the things you've done. Hunter's jaw clenched. Get out, now, or what? Rollins taunted. You'll count inventory at me. In a flash, Hunter's gun was in his hand, though Sarah hadn't even seen him draw it. Or I'll put a hole in you, he said quietly. The tension in the room was palpable. Rollins' men had their hands on their weapons, but none had drawn. Rollins himself looked surprised, then amused. Well, maybe there's some spine left in you after all. He backed toward the door, his men following. See you in Sweetwater, O'Malley. We can catch up properly then. After they left, the store fell silent. Hunter holstered his gun, his movements precise but his hand slightly unsteady. Who were those men? Sarah asked. Hunter wouldn't meet her eyes. From my past, before I came here. Hunter rode with some rough outfits in his younger days, Thaddeus explained gently. But he left all that behind years ago. Sarah looked at Hunter's face, now closed off and remote again. The openness he'd shown her earlier was gone, replaced by a guarded wariness that hurt her heart. Did you really ride with killers? She asked quietly. Hunter finally looked at her, his blue eyes pained. Yes, he said simply. I was young, angry, lost. He swallowed hard. Did things I'm not proud of, never killed innocents, but I stood by sometimes when I should have stopped it. The raw honesty in his voice touched something in Sarah. But you left, she said. You chose a different path. A muscle worked in his jaw. Too late for some. Thaddeus cleared his throat. What's done is done. Hunter's been nothing but honorable since he came to Silver Creek. That's all that matters to me. He looked between them. Now about this poker tournament. I'm going, Hunter said firmly. It's our best chance. I'm coming with you, Sarah decided suddenly. Both men looked at her in surprise. Absolutely not, Thaddeus sputtered. Sweetwater's no place for a lady. The saloon's there. I don't intend to frequent the saloons, Sarah interrupted. But Hunter will need someone to watch his back with those men around. She met Hunter's gaze steadily. Besides, two can travel more safely than one. Hunter studied her for a long moment, then did something that shocked her. He smiled. It was small and brief, just a slight upturning of his lips, but it transformed his face, making him look younger and impossibly handsome. Stubborn, he said, but there was a warmth in his voice that made her stomach flutter. Like her father, Thaddeus sighed. Fine, but you'll stay at the hotel, nowhere near the tournament, and you'll take my shotgun. The journey to Sweetwater would take 2 days on horseback. Sarah hadn't ridden much since arriving in Colorado, but she'd been a competent horsewoman back east. Hunter helped her pack supplies and select a gentle mare from the livery stable. They set out early the next morning, Hunter leading the way on his sturdy buckskin gelding. Sarah found herself studying his broad shoulders and straight back as they rode, admiring the easy way he moved with his horse, as if they were one being. The landscape around them was breathtaking, rolling hills giving way to rugged mountains in the distance, vast blue sky overhead. They rode in companionable silence for the most part, stopping occasionally to rest the horses or to eat. As the sun began to set, Hunter led them off the trail to a small clearing beside a creek. We'll camp here, he said, dismounting smoothly. Sarah slid from her saddle less gracefully, her muscles protesting after hours of riding. Hunter noticed her wince and approached her, concern in his eyes. Sore? He asked. She nodded ruefully. It's been a while since I've ridden this long. Walk a bit, he advised. I'll set up camp. Sarah stretched her legs while Hunter efficiently unpacked their supplies, built a small fire, and set up their bedrolls on opposite sides of it. She watched with admiration as he moved with practiced ease, preparing a simple meal of beans and bacon in a small pot over the fire. As they ate, sitting side by side on a fallen log, Sarah decided to attempt conversation. "Have you always been good at poker?" she asked. Hunter glanced at her, seemingly surprised by the question. "Learned young," he said. "Father taught me." Said reading people was more important than reading cards. A faint smile touched his lips. "Comanche made me better. Hard people to read, had to learn. And those men today, Rollins and his gang, you rode with them after you left the Comanche." Hunter's face darkened. For a time was angry. "Didn't fit anywhere. They didn't care what I was long as I could shoot." He set his plate aside, staring into the fire. "Didn't know what they were at first. By the time I did." He trailed off. "It's hard to leave the only place you belong," Sarah said softly, understanding in her voice. Hunter looked at her, surprise and gratitude in his eyes. "Yes," he said simply. They were quiet for a moment, the fire crackling between them. "What about you?" Hunter asked suddenly. "Why'd you come west after your father died?" The question startled her. It was the longest one he'd ever asked her. "I had few options in Boston," she admitted. "My father left debts, the house had to be sold. I could have become a governess, perhaps, or married quickly for security." She shrugged. "Uncle's letter offering me a home and purpose came at exactly the right time." "No suitors back east?" Hunter asked, his tone carefully casual. Sarah smiled slightly. "A few, none that interested me." She glanced at him. "I always wanted more than a comfortable cage." Hunter nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Freedom matters," he said quietly. "Yes, exactly." They fell into silence again, but it was comfortable, like a conversation without words. As the fire died down, Sarah reluctantly moved to her bedroll. Hunter added wood to the fire, then settled on his own bedroll, his gun beside him. "Sleep," he told her. "I'll keep watch for a while." Sarah wanted to protest that he needed rest too, but she could see the alertness in his eyes, the watchfulness that seemed as much a part of him as his silence. "Good night, Hunter," she said softly. "Good night, Sarah," he replied, and the sound of her name on his lips sent a pleasant warmth through her that had nothing to do with the fire. She fell asleep watching him through half-closed eyes, his profile strong against the firelight, and felt safer than she had in years. The next day brought them to Sweetwater by mid-afternoon. It was larger than Silver Creek, with more permanent buildings and a bustling main street. The tournament would begin that evening at the largest saloon in town, the Golden Nugget. Hunter secured them rooms at the hotel, separate but adjacent, and left Sarah to rest while he went to register for the tournament. When he returned, his expression was grim. "Rollins is here," he said without preamble, "and Preston too." Sarah's heart sank. "Preston, what's he doing in Sweetwater?" Backing another player, man named Donovan, professional gambler. Hunter sat heavily on a chair in her room. "Tournament's bigger than I thought, 50 players at least." "But you can win," Sarah said, with more confidence than she felt. "I've seen you play at the store when the Cowboys come by for their weekly game. You never lose." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Different stakes here." As evening approached, Sarah changed into her best remaining dress, a deep green that brought out the copper highlights in her brown hair. When Hunter knocked on her door, he too had changed, wearing a clean black shirt and his least worn pair of trousers. He'd even trimmed his beard slightly. The effect was striking. He looked dangerous and handsome in equal measure. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her, that now familiar softening happening almost instantly. "You look." He began, then seemed to lose the words. "Thank you," she said, understanding what he couldn't express. "So do you." They walked to the saloon together, Hunter's hand occasionally brushing hers in a way that sent tingles up her arm. The Golden Nugget was crowded and noisy, thick with cigarette smoke and the smell of whiskey. Sarah had never been in such an establishment before and tried not to look as out of place as she felt. Hunter led her to a small table near the back where they could observe without being too visible. "Stay here," he told her. "Tournament starts in an hour. I need to buy in." As he walked away, a serving girl approached Sarah's table. "What can I get you, honey?" she asked, her heavily painted face kind despite her garish appearance. "Just water, please," Sarah replied. The girl laughed. Honey, no one comes to the Nugget for water. I'll bring you a sherry, small one. She winked and moved away before Sarah could protest. From her vantage point, Sarah could see Hunter at the bar, paying his entry fee to a man with a ledger. Nearby stood Stanley Preston, talking animatedly with a flashily dressed man she assumed was Donovan. On the other side of the room, Rollins and his men were already drinking heavily, laughing raucously. The serving girl returned with Sarah's sherry. As she set it down, she followed Sarah's gaze to Hunter. "That your man?" she asked. Sarah blushed. "He's a friend," the girl smirked. "If you say so, honey. He's a handsome one, though quiet. Been watching him since you two came in. Only got eyes for you." Before Sarah could respond, the girl was called away. Sarah sipped her sherry, the sweet liquid burning pleasantly as it went down. She watched as Hunter made his way back to her, moving with that fluid grace that seemed at odds with his size. "All set," he said, sliding into the seat beside her. His thigh pressed against hers briefly, and she felt a jolt of awareness at the contact. "Tournament starts soon. 10 tables, 5 players each. Winners advance." "And how much did you put in?" she asked. 200, all the cash I had." His eyes were steady on hers. "If I lose, we still have my savings. Not enough for the loan, but something." Sarah reached out impulsively and touched his hand. "You won't lose." Hunter looked down at her hand on his, then turned his palm up, his fingers curling around hers for just a moment. The simple touch felt more intimate than any embrace Sarah had ever shared with a suitor. A bell rang, signaling the start of the tournament. Hunter released her hand reluctantly. "Stay here," he said, "or go back to the hotel if you prefer." "I'll stay," she said firmly. "I want to see you win." The tournament began with Hunter at a table far from both Preston's man and Rollins. Sarah watched as he played, his face impassive, giving nothing away. He didn't speak unless necessary, letting the other players fill the silence with chatter and boasting. One by one, they made mistakes, betting too much on weak hands or folding too early on strong ones. Hunter simply played, methodical and patient, his stack of chips growing steadily. By midnight, the field had narrowed to 20 players. Hunter was among them, as were Donovan and, unfortunately, Rollins, who'd played with reckless abandon but somehow managed to survive. Sarah's eyes were growing heavy, the long day and the single sherry taking their toll. Hunter noticed her stifling a yawn during a break between rounds. "Go to the hotel," he told her gently. "Get some sleep. This will go on all night." "I want to stay," she protested, but another yawn betrayed her. "Need you sharp tomorrow," he said, his voice low. "In case." He didn't finish the thought, but his eyes flicked to where Rollins sat, drinking heavily and glaring in their direction. Understanding, Sarah nodded. "Be careful," she whispered, squeezing his arm lightly before leaving the saloon. The night air was cool and refreshing after the smoky interior of the Nugget. Sarah walked quickly toward the hotel, her mind on Hunter. In just a few days, everything had changed between them. The silent, stoic man who'd barely acknowledged her presence now spoke to her, however sparingly. And those moments when his eyes softened when he looked at her had become more frequent. She was falling in love with him, she realized with a start. The thought should have frightened her. Hunter O'Malley was nothing like the men she'd expected to marry someday. He was rough-edged and scarred by his past, a man of few words and many secrets. But there was a gentleness in him too, a deep well of feeling that showed in his eyes and in the careful way he treated her, as if she were something precious. Lost in these thoughts, Sarah didn't notice the man following her until he grabbed her arm, pulling her into an alley between buildings. She opened her mouth to scream, but a hand clamped over it. "Quiet now, Miss Kincaid," Stanley Preston's voice hissed in her ear. "I just want to talk." Sarah bit his hand hard. Preston cursed and released her but blocked her exit from the alley. "That was unnecessary," he said, rubbing his hand. "What do you want?" Sarah demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. She reached into her pocket, fingers closing around the small derringer Hunter had insisted she carry. "I want what I've always wanted, your uncle's property. And I thought perhaps you might be more reasonable away from that savage you seem so fond of." Preston straightened his jacket. "My offer still stands. Marry me and I'll forgive the debt." I'd rather lose the store than marry you, Sarah said coldly. Preston's face hardened. You're making a mistake. O'Malley is no good for you. Do you know what he's done? The people he's hurt. He's barely civilized, living with those savages for years. I know exactly who Hunter is, Sarah replied. A better man than you'll ever be. Is that so? Preston laughed bitterly. Then perhaps you should know that your precious Hunter was part of the gang that murdered my brother and his family 5 years ago. Sarah's heart stuttered. You're lying. Am I? Ask him about the Jenkins outfit and what they did at Copper Creek. Ask him where he was when my brother's ranch was raided, his wife violated, his children slaughtered. Preston's voice shook with genuine emotion. Ask him why I hate him so much. Before Sarah could respond, footsteps sounded at the mouth of the alley. Sarah. Hunter's deep voice called, concerned. Preston stepped back. Think about what I said, Miss Kincaid, and my offer. With that, he slipped away down the dark alley. Hunter appeared a moment later, his face tight with worry. When he saw her, relief washed over him. Heard you yell, he said. You okay? Sarah stared at him, Preston's accusations ringing in her ears. Did you kill Preston's brother? She asked bluntly. Hunter went very still, his face draining of color. Who told you that? Preston just did. He followed me from the saloon. Sarah's heart was pounding. Is it true? Were you part of the gang that murdered his family? For a long moment, Hunter said nothing, his blue eyes anguished. Then, quietly, I was with the Jenkins outfit then, when they hit the Preston ranch. Sarah felt as if she'd been struck. So it's true, she whispered. No. Hunter took a step toward her, then stopped when she flinched. I was there, yes, but I didn't kill anyone. I tried to stop it. His voice was raw with emotion. Jenkins and the others, they were drunk, crazy, started shooting before I knew what was happening. I got the children out. Hid them in the root cellar, but Preston's brother and his wife, they were already dead. And Rollins, Sarah asked, remembering the scarred man's taunts. He was the worst of them, enjoyed it. Hunter's hands clenched at his sides. I left the next day, couldn't ride with them anymore. Been running from it ever since. Sarah studied his face in the dim light of the alley. She saw pain there and regret, but no deception. Why does Preston blame you specifically? Because I lived, Hunter said simply. The law caught up with Jenkins and most of the others a month later. Hanged them all, I was the only one who got away. He looked at her pleadingly. I've tried to make up for it, for not stopping them sooner, for being there at all. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. The pain in his voice was undeniable, as was his sincerity. I believe you, she said softly. Relief flooded his face. Then, to her surprise, he reached for her hand, holding it gently in his much larger one. Thought I'd lose you, he said quietly, when you knew. The simple statement and the vulnerability behind it melted something in Sarah's heart. It would take more than that, she replied, squeezing his hand. Hunter's eyes softened in that way that made her breath catch. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, but instead he tucked her hand into the crook of his arm. Let's get you back to the hotel, he said. As they walked, Sarah asked, How's the tournament going? Good, down to 10 players, break till morning. His mouth quirked up slightly. I'm still in, and Rollins, Donovan, both still playing. Rollins is drunk, making mistakes. Donovan's good, very good. Hunter's expression grew serious. Preston's watching me, suspects something. Do you think he knows about the loan, that we're trying to save the store? Hunter nodded grimly. Small town, word travels. He glanced down at her. Be careful tomorrow, Preston's desperate. When they reached the hotel, Hunter walked her to her room. At the door, Sarah turned to him. Thank you for coming to find me and for telling me the truth. Hunter looked down at her, his eyes filled with an emotion she was beginning to recognize as tenderness. Always will, he said softly. Tell you the truth, keep you safe. He hesitated, then added, if you'll let me. The promise in those words made Sarah's heart race. I'd like that, she whispered. For a long moment they stood there, something powerful and unspoken building between them. Then Hunter stepped back, breaking the spell. Get some rest, he said, his voice rough. Tomorrow's important. Sarah nodded, disappointment and anticipation warring within her. Good night, Hunter. Good night, Sarah, he replied, and there was such warmth in the way he said her name that she carried it with her into her dreams. The final day of the tournament dawned clear and hot. Sarah, dressed carefully in a pale blue dress that Hunter had once, in a rare moment of openness, said brought out the color of her eyes. She met him for breakfast in the hotel dining room where he was already waiting, looking tired but alert. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked, noting the shadows under his eyes. "Some," he replied, which she took to mean very little. They ate quickly, neither mentioning the charged moment outside her door the night before. As they walked to the saloon, Hunter briefed her on the tournament status. Final table, 6 players. Me, Rollins, Donovan, and 3 others. He glanced at her. Winner takes all, $1,000. And second place? Sarah asked. Hunter shook his head. Nothing, all or nothing. The saloon was quieter than the night before, most of the spectators and eliminated players having moved on. The final table was set up on a raised platform at the center of the room, allowing onlookers a clear view. Hunter took his seat, nodding briefly to the other players. Rollins sneered at him, while Donovan merely assessed him coolly. Sarah found a seat at the bar where she could watch without being too obvious. Preston stood nearby, his eyes moving between Hunter and her with calculating interest. The game began, the dealer efficiently distributing cards. Hunter played conservatively at first, folding more often than betting, watching the other players carefully. Rollins played aggressively, winning a few early hands but losing a significant amount on a bluff that Donovan called. As the morning wore on, 2 players were eliminated, leaving just 4, Hunter, Rollins, Donovan, and an older man named Miller. The stakes grew higher, the tension palpable. Sarah could see the strain on Hunter's face, the concentration in his eyes as he assessed each hand, each player. During a brief break, as the dealer shuffled new cards, Preston approached Sarah at the bar. "Your Cowboy's doing well," he remarked casually, "better than I expected." "Mr. O'Malley is full of surprises," Sarah replied coolly. "Indeed." Preston sipped his drink. "Did you consider my offer?" "There's nothing to consider. I won't marry you, Mr. Preston, no matter what happens here today." Preston's expression hardened. "Then I hope you're prepared to leave Silver Creek, because one way or another I will have that property." Before Sarah could respond, a commotion at the table drew their attention. Rollins was on his feet, face flushed with anger and drink. "You're cheating," he shouted at Hunter. "No way you had that hand." Hunter remained seated, his expression impassive. "Sit down, Rollins, you're drunk." "Don't tell me what to do, half-breed." Rollins' hand moved to his gun. The saloon went silent. Miller and Donovan both pushed back from the table, clearly wanting no part of the confrontation. The dealer stepped away, hands raised. Hunter slowly stood, his eyes never leaving Rollins. "Make your play," he said quietly, "or sit down and lose like a man." For a tense moment, it seemed Rollins would draw, then abruptly he laughed and removed his hand from his gun. "Always were a cold one, O'Malley. Fine, let's play cards." The game resumed, but the atmosphere had changed, charged with the threat of violence. Sarah's heart raced as she watched Hunter, his face a mask of concentration, his hands steady as he handled his cards and chips. An hour later, Miller was eliminated after a bold play against Donovan failed. Now it was just 3, Hunter, Rollins, and Donovan, with Donovan holding the largest stack of chips. The next hand proved decisive. Donovan and Hunter both bet heavily while Rollins folded early. When the final card was turned, Hunter's full house beat Donovan's flush. The professional gambler accepted his defeat graciously, tipping his hat to Hunter before departing. Now it was just Hunter and Rollins, the 2 men who'd once ridden together, now facing off across a table with far more than money at stake. Rollins was drinking heavily, his play becoming increasingly erratic. Hunter remained steady, patient, waiting for his opponent to make a mistake. When it came, it was spectacular, Rollins betting everything on a pair of kings, only to be called by Hunter's 3 queens. "No." Rollins roared, flipping the table as he stood, cards and chips scattered across the floor. "You cheating bastard." This time his gun cleared its holster, but Hunter was faster. In a fluid motion he drew and fired, the shot echoing in the confined space of the saloon. Rollins staggered, a look of surprise on his face as he clutched his shoulder. His gun clattered to the floor. "It's over, Rollins," Hunter said, his gun still trained on the wounded man. Leave town, don't come back." Rollins' men rushed forward to help their leader, glaring at Hunter but making no move against him, aware that the law and the witnesses were not on their side. As they dragged Rollins away, Sarah hurried to Hunter's side. His face was pale, his hand steady but his eyes troubled as he holstered his gun. "Are you all right?" she asked quietly. He nodded once. "One," he said simply. The saloon owner approached, a small cloth bag in his hand. "Your winnings, sir, $1,000 as promised." He handed the bag to Hunter, who accepted it with a nod of thanks. Preston stood nearby, his face a mask of barely contained fury. As Hunter and Sarah moved toward the exit, he stepped into their path. "This isn't over, O'Malley," he hissed. "That money won't save you or that old fool Kincaid." Hunter regarded him steadily. "It's over, Preston. Take the loss. Like my brother did." Preston's voice shook with emotion. "I'll see you run out of Colorado before I let this go." Sarah stepped forward, her own anger rising. "Mr. Preston, your quarrel is based on a misunderstanding. Hunter didn't kill your brother, he saved your nieces and nephews." Preston blinked in surprise. "What are you talking about? My brother's children died in the attack." Hunter and Sarah exchanged a confused look. "No," Hunter said slowly, "I hid them in the root cellar. Sheriff Burke found them the next day, took them to their aunt in Denver." Preston stared at him, shock written across his face. "Burke told me everyone was killed, that there were no survivors." A horrible understanding dawned on Sarah. "Sheriff Burke was working with the Jenkins gang, wasn't he?" She asked Hunter. Hunter nodded grimly. "Found out later he was taking cuts from their robberies, providing information." He looked at Preston. "He lied to you, probably took the children somewhere else, didn't want witnesses." Preston's face had gone ashen. "All these years I've been hating the wrong man." He looked up at Hunter, decades of rage giving way to confusion. "Where are they now, my brother's children?" "Don't know," Hunter admitted. "Been looking off and on. Trail went cold after Denver." For a long moment, Preston stared at Hunter, reassessing everything he'd believed. Then, slowly, he stepped aside. "I need to think about this," he said quietly, "but if what you say is true, I've done you a great wrong, O'Malley." "We've both made mistakes," Hunter replied evenly. "But the loan on Kincaid's store, that ends now." Preston nodded slowly. "Come by the bank when you return to Silver Creek, we'll settle it." With that, he turned and walked away, a man whose foundation had just crumbled beneath him. Outside, in the bright sunshine, Sarah looked up at Hunter with wondering eyes. "You've been searching for Preston's nieces and nephews all this time?" Hunter shrugged uncomfortably. "Trying to make it right, somehow." Impulsively, Sarah reached up and touched his cheek. "You're a good man, Hunter O'Malley, better than you give yourself credit for." His eyes softened in that way that made her heart skip. "Not good enough," he murmured. "Not for you." Sarah's breath caught. "That's not true. It's never been true." For a long moment they stood there on the boardwalk, the world moving around them but forgotten. Then Hunter said, "We should get back. Thaddeus will be worried." The ride back to Silver Creek seemed shorter somehow, perhaps because they talked more than they had on the journey to Sweetwater. Hunter spoke more than Sarah had ever heard him, telling her about his childhood before the raid that took his parents, about his years with the Comanche, and his struggle to find his place afterwards. In turn, Sarah told him about her life in Boston, her dreams of adventure that had brought her west, and her growing love for the frontier life, despite its hardships. As they rode into Silver Creek late the next day, Thaddeus was waiting anxiously on the porch of the general store. His face lit up when he saw them approaching. "You're back," he called, hurrying down to meet them as they dismounted. "How did it go?" Hunter reached into his saddlebag and pulled out the cloth bag containing their winnings. Without a word, he handed it to Thaddeus. The old man's eyes widened as he felt the weight of the coins inside. "You won," he breathed. Hunter nodded, a slight smile touching his lips. "All of it." Thaddeus let out a whoop of joy that startled several passers-by. He threw his arms around Hunter in a bear hug, then did the same to Sarah. "I knew you could do it, my boy. I just knew it." That evening, after the store was closed and their journey recounted over a celebratory dinner, Sarah found herself alone with Hunter on the small porch behind the store. The summer night was warm, stars scattered like diamond dust across the dark sky. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Hunter leaned against the porch rail, his profile strong in the moonlight. "Store's safe. Preston won't bother you anymore." Sarah moved closer to him. "That's not what I meant." He turned to look at her, and in his eyes she saw a vulnerability that made her heart ache. "What do you want to happen?" he asked quietly. "I want you to stop thinking you're not good enough," she said firmly. "I want you to stop hiding who you are from me. I want—" She took a deep breath. "I want you, Hunter, all of you." His eyes widened slightly, that beautiful softening happening once again. "Sarah," he murmured, her name a prayer on his lips. She stepped even closer until she could feel the warmth of his body. "You've hardly spoken to me since we met, but your eyes. They've been telling me everything I need to know." Hunter raised a hand hesitantly and touched her cheek, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Never been good with words," he admitted, "but with you, I want to try." "Then tell me," she whispered. "Tell me what you feel." He swallowed hard, his blue eyes intense in the moonlight. "Feel like I've been lost my whole life, until you walked into that store." His thumb brushed her cheekbone, sending shivers down her spine. "You make me want to be better, to deserve you." "You already do," Sarah assured him, reaching up to cover his hand with hers. "You always have." Hunter's other hand came to rest at her waist, drawing her closer still. "I love you, Sarah Kincaid," he said, the words rough with emotion. "Have since the moment I saw you." Joy bloomed in Sarah's chest, warm and bright. "I love you too, Hunter O'Malley," she replied. "My quiet cowboy with the telling eyes." When his lips finally met hers, it was like coming home, gentle yet passionate, a promise of everything to come. Hunter's arms wrapped around her, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in his world. In the months that followed, Silver Creek saw many changes. With the loan paid off and Preston's hostility replaced by a cautious alliance, the general store thrived. Hunter became more than just a worker. He became a partner in the business and in Thaddeus's family. To the surprise of many in town, the taciturn cowboy began to speak more, though he would never be a man of many words. But with Sarah, he shared his thoughts and dreams, his fears and hopes. And when they were married that autumn, with golden leaves drifting down around them in the churchyard, he spoke his vows in a clear, strong voice that left no doubt of his devotion. Preston, true to his word, withdrew his claim on the store property. With Hunter's help, he eventually tracked down his brother's children, now grown and living in California. The reunion began a healing process for the banker, who became, if not a friend, at least no longer an enemy. As for Rollins, he and his gang left Colorado territory, moving east to escape Hunter's reputation, which had only grown after the shootout in Sweetwater. 3 years later, on another warm summer evening, Hunter sat on that same back porch, a small bundle cradled in his arms. His son, Thomas Thaddeus O'Malley, slept peacefully, tiny fingers curled around his father's much larger one. Sarah joined them, her hand resting on Hunter's shoulder as she gazed down at their child. "He has your eyes," she said softly. Hunter looked up at her, love plainly written on his face. "Poor boy," he said with a rare smile. Sarah laughed and leaned down to kiss him. "I happen to love those eyes. They told me everything I needed to know about you, even when you wouldn't say a word." Hunter shifted the baby to one arm so he could reach up and touch his wife's cheek. "Don't need many words," he said. "Not when I have you to understand them." Sarah smiled, thinking of the quiet cowboy who had stolen her heart with a look. "I always will," she promised, and knew it was true. As the sun set over Silver Creek, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the O'Malley family sat together in contented silence, their future as bright as the western horizon. Hunter, once a man apart, had found his place at last not in the vastness of the frontier, but in the heart of the woman who had seen past his silence to the man within. And though he would never be one for lengthy speeches, his eyes would always soften each time she walked into the room, telling Sarah everything she would ever need to know.